but one of the questions we've been asking is kind of like, what have you learned from what you've seen, or what do you think was interesting? And then, what would you be, and so from that kind of, what would you take back to your own organization that you think could be integrated, and what do you think needs to be integrated into kind of models that you've been exposed to?
We're a little different,
yeah,
because, but I got it.
You know what I mean?
I will even phrase everything in the form of it.
That is so great. Wow, you've done this before.
It's really cool to see people shooting as much as I see now, video with SLR stuff.
Yeah.
It kicks ass.
I know it does.
Yeah. And the glass is really good, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the difference. I'm an old video guy from hell.
Oh, really? Cool. You look good.
I'll try not to look directly at the camera. How's that work? Man, got that in Texas. The fuck is that?
Don't bully those
Goddamn camera. Video.
Yeah. So we should probably start with something about...
Yeah, the first thing is just, can you give us like the 3-minute about your organization?
Not even 3 minutes.
Give an elevator, an elevator explanation of what you guys do.
Sure. My name is Paul Ford. You want to do this way? This way?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, cool. My name is Paul Ford, and I'm the Vice President of Community Development for SoftLayer Technologies in Dallas, Texas. SoftLayer Technologies is an infrastructure as a service company. What does that mean? That means we're basically a big fancy schmancy hosting company. We do cloud, we do dedicated hardware, we do seamless hybrids of both. We've got about almost 115,000 servers in 11 data centers in the US and 2 international data centers, Amsterdam and Singapore.
So what are the goals of the project you're trying to do as it relates to the incubating and kind of helping startups?
Well, the ethos behind SoftLayer is very much in parallel to what Unnoodle is doing, with what a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to do, with what groups like Unnoodle and the incubators and accelerators involved are really all about. We started the company on 5/5/05, and at that time there wasn't a lot of financing available, really, because it was still kind of post-bubble-ish, and no one understood what we were doing. So we had to bootstrap a data center company. You with me? Not cheap, not easy. So we basically had to fight, kick, crawl, friends, family money, mortgages, loans from people to get where we are today. We eventually got some really expensive financing, but basically bootstrapped it from zero to, we'll do just under about 500 million bucks this year. So we know where everyone is. We know what the deal is and how hard it is to be an entrepreneur and how hard it is to really make your dreams happen. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've raised a bunch of millions of bucks with my wife, didn't kill each other. And what's interesting to me as far as how SoftLayer works and the way we give back to startups, which is what we're doing now, when I did a lot of stuff, entrepreneurially, there weren't these kind of systems. There was no Y Combinator, there was no Techstars, there was nothing. There was no systems like this to teach you the best practices and methodologies of how the heck do you do a startup? How do you make a technology company? And personally, we did everything you can do wrong, at a minimum of at least once, but you gotta get back up and keep going, get back up and keep going. So, for me personally, giving back to this kind of community to help, because I'm in a position I can help, with giving infrastructure help and advice and mentorship and a lot of other things to entrepreneurs and to incubator and accelerator programs. That's really where we come from. That's what SoftLayer is all about, and that's what I'm really all about.
Okay, do you think, I'm just going to scrap the question. Do you think there's anything that, because a lot of these incubators are kind of, they seem like they kind of have a non-profit model, where they're kind of, it seems like there's a potential to kind of like lack kind of direction. Is there anything you would say that they could incorporate from kind of like the private sector that you think would be useful in kind of the incubating system?
I think because we're seeing so many incubators and accelerators pop up, there are let's call the biggies, like the Y Combinators and the Techstars, but there's a huge void in between the 10 people per class or the 50 people per class who can get into those organizations and the rest of the world. There's a lot of people that still want to get involved and really want to understand how to do this stuff. The thing that I think is important, a couple of things. The first thing is really what UNoodle and what this is all about, is bringing people together to talk about their commonalities, to talk about their programs, to talk about best practices, next practices. The glue that can hold this stuff together, like UNoodle, I think is invaluable. Through that process, another thing that I think is interesting is looking at what the different types of incubators are doing. Because I think in certain sectors and in certain geographies, verticalization makes sense. For instance, in India, there are a ton of things going on, in entrepreneurism, in startups, and a lot of different areas. But something that's really core to almost everyone that I've ever met from India is social good and giving back and those type of things. So verticals like that in particular geographies with particular people make sense. Another great example, Vietnam and some other countries that are similar to Vietnam. Those countries never had complete landlines. So running the internet in that concept just doesn't make sense. So focusing on mobile technologies in those areas, in those geographies where everyone's got a handset and that's the internet to them, that kind of stuff makes sense. So I think where verticalization and specialization makes sense globally is great, but even then, no one's going to operate that in a vacuum. Verticals are verticals and they're kind of ubiquitous globally. And bringing people together like this, even if they're sharing more specific knowledge and specific data, I think is invaluable.
One more question. We got to go, dude. We're really late, so we get one more question.
Okay. I didn't know.
I'm his handler today.
Yeah. Josh didn't even know he was in here. Look at that neat one.
All right, I think that was probably most important. So you were saying that you think you've made every mistake along the way that you could have?
For sure.
Well, if you were to give an entrepreneur some advice that was just starting, what would you say?
My advice to startups really would be keep on trying. You gotta keep going. You gotta understand that there are methodologies behind this. It's a process, but you gotta stick with it. You gotta keep going. When you think you've hit problems that seem like they're the end of the world, they're not. They've happened before. It's rarely unique, and you gotta trust in yourself and the mentors that you're working with and the people like the accelerator systems you may be involved with to give you that hand and stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. The problems aren't unique. They're still problems, but you gotta keep driving on because there are people there to help, and they're definitely gonna help you get over that hump, and tomorrow's another day.
Can we do one more? I just have one last question.
Yeah,
I'd love to ask you. So how do you?
I do this good.
Yeah. How do you feel about the? Basically, the question is government.
Yeah.
Do you think it's an enabling? I mean, I know different contexts can play a different role. I'd say, but.
I think governments play a semi-unique but important role in systems like this because if it wasn't for public money to kind of jumpstart private sectors where people are still maybe a little skittish on the investment side or, a startup might seem to be a fake job that you're having from your mom's garage or your basement, they give that sort of air of legitimacy to the entire process. And I think it brings private sector people in. The most successful systems that I've run across, and I work with probably 95 incubators and accelerators globally, so I see a lot of this stuff. The most successful ones that have a public component to them, at a certain point, it becomes sort of an arm's length sort of thing, and they start to separate out. And the governments are generally cool with that. They want to see things up and running and succeed. Just once they do get up and running and start to be successful, the people involved don't want to have what they may construe as being a little bit of an onerous factor hanging over them from government. So I don't want to say necessary evil because they're all great people, but it works to get things going. But again, at a certain point, time to break free and do your own thing.
All right, cool. I think
cool.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Would you mind just I know it's a lot.
We'll give you a machine. Yeah, no problem. What do you do with it?
So I'm a college student and I'm trying to make a documentary about entrepreneurs
Cool.
up and coming,
All right.
and as well as connectors or incubators.
You know what I'm going to do?
happy to send you any information.
And if I can be any help with what your project is too, you know, immediately or know what you're
Thank you.
it's right there.
Great. You don't have to put your home address. That's just maybe just like where you're staying.
All right. We may follow you.
Great.
Nice.
This is your Paul at Southern. Great. You don't just send that to your
Right.
Thank you again.
Lauren,
Thank you very much. This is
Cool.
Dylan.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
What? Yeah.
Coworker coming?
Yeah.